Hello, word nerds! Happy Sunday and welcome to our weekly live chat. This is going to be our first ever deep dive into a specific genre. We're hoping to do more of these in the future, and we figured we would kick things off with the wide world of paranormal. What that means, we're going to figure it out because there's a whole lot going on. So we're going to kick things off by just kind of doing our go down the line, answer a question, jumping in with name one of your favorite paranormal books. It's just kind of a way to get into what this is. So Erin, you are first.
I'm gonna go with urban fantasy. I'm gonna go with urban fantasy because like one of the only book series I know is the Jim Butcher Dresden Files. Because I really like urban fantasy or paranormal. Because we're categorizing it together, right?
Yeah, we are.
Okay. Okay, good.
And Megan?
So I'm going to go with one of the first like straight up paranormals that I ever read, which was the Summoning series by Kelly Armstrong. And I remember like reading it and just falling in love with it back when I was in high school.
And Emma?
I'm not sure yet. I wasn't prepared for this question. I should have been prepared for this question, but I'm not.
I know, like, all the questions I could try to come up with were hard because it's hard. I don't know. I would think I know more about this genre than maybe I do. I read a lot of adult urban fantasy. So for me, I'm going to go with the Mercy Thompson series by Patricia Briggs, which is amazing, but it's definitely urban fantasy. But I don't know.
Yeah, I'm like scrolling through my Goodreads and I'm like, I haven't read any paranormal in a long time.
Twilight.
Realizing how long I've read it. I will say a classic. I do really love the Vampire Academy books. Like those are really, really good, and like those are like pre-Twilight. That's like classic paranormal YA.
So good.
You know?
I reread the first one this week.
Yeah.
It's so good.
So that's gonna be my answer because that's great.
Yeah. If more paranormal was like that, I'd read it all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's definitely one of those things I can only like read so much of. Where like some genres I can like read a lot of like over and over again, but I find paranormal, like especially paranormal romance, like I can like read like maybe one series and then I'm like, okay, like I'm ready for something else now. Like it's not something I can constantly read.
Yeah, Megan and I were doing some digging onto like how to define it and like the history of it and all of that, and there's a lot of different ways to look at it. The one that's in my head for self-publishing is very much paranormal is the romance side, and urban fantasy is that there's romance, but it's not the plot. And the ones that are just like magic stuff in modern world, can't get enough of it. But the romance stuff is a little, it's got to be in the mood.
Yeah. I think that's why you'll probably hear us doing a lot of like, well, this one's urban fantasy and this one's paranormal. It's because there is so much overlap that like you can't really be sure if it's not one or the other.
Yeah. And then like you'll have things that like aren't quite a paranormal romance because it's not a romance specifically, but like it doesn't feel like an urban fantasy. It feels more paranormal. So that always like complicates things. That's how I feel about like Not Even Bones. I guess that's something I've read recently that's kind of like paranormal-ish. Because it definitely feels more paranormal than urban fantasy because like it's in like the jungles of Peru. It definitely doesn't feel like urban fantasy. But like the romance isn't the center of it or anything. It's like barely hinted at, you know?
Barely any romance.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have even categorized that as paranormal, so clearly you have to know.
Yeah, I feel like thinking about it, I wouldn't know where to categorize it because it's like, well, it's not sci-fi. It's not like a new technology. It's just like this fantastical group, but it isn't magic. They're just beings that exist.
It's like basically in whatever category the Savage Song fits in, that's where Not Even Bones fits. Like it's kind of like
and if there was a big romance, I would easily categorize it as paranormal.
Interesting.
Megan, did you want to try to explain the like magic thing we were talking about earlier?
Yeah. So one of the most concise ways that Kelly and I found through our research to determine whether it's paranormal or urban fantasy. And again, there's going to be exceptions to this because it's very complicated and there doesn't seem to be a straight up right answer. But this one was recommending if you take the fantastical thing out and the characters become just regular humans, then it's probably an urban fantasy. So like think Harry Potter, you take the magic out, Harry still exists, he's just a muggle, or if that term doesn't exist, so he's just a human. However, Twilight, you take the vampires out, the Cullens do not exist, so the story doesn't happen. So if it gets rid of the character or like the villain or whoever it is that is being sexy and evil and a monster, then it's probably paranormal. If you take it out and it makes someone human, like it's like a magic component that just gets removed, then it's probably urban fantasy.
What do you guys think of like City of Bones? Would that be? Because it has werewolves.
See, I would put it a little more towards paranormal if I was choosing, just because of how heavy the romance feels.
And it's an interesting one because the romance is heavy, but also so is the like action, like fighting, magic.
Yeah. And the urban setting is definitely bigger than a lot of YA series as well.
Yeah, and she does a really good job of.
She's falling in love with a paranormal creature.
Yeah, so it's like a lot of things.
Yeah. And a lot of urban fantasy still has paranormal creatures.
And still has romance too.
And a lot of paranormal has fantastical elements. Like you look at Twilight, the Cullens have these magical powers still, you know, seeing the future, being able to smell Bella really well. Like
in biology class.
When the wind blows through her beautiful hair.
Because when you think of like City of Bones, it's like the main characters, the shadow hunters, like they're just like people with magical powers and like some very distant like angel blood or something, but they're fighting paranormal creatures. So
So it's like at that point they're so far removed from the paranormal creature that's supposed to be their ancestry that it's like, is it magic at that point?
Which it kind of feels like it is. Especially Jason Clary, because they have like extra magic powers.
And especially with like the runes introduction, like that feels very fantasy, having the runes that can do different things.
Come together, isn't it?
And it's like, while the romance is a big part of the story, I still don't think it is think of it as like the main plot. Like I think the whole like defeating Valentine feels like a bigger plot. Where in Twilight, like Bella and Edward being able to be together is the whole point of like all the things they do is just so they can be together.
It's like Jace meets Clary, not as like Jace meets Clary, that's the end goal, but as like Jace meets Clary and can help her get to her mom. Oh, you're right on that.
So do we have any like more recent examples of anything like modern fantasy in either of these directions? Because we keep thinking of like classic YA stuff. But what is, there's got to be something.
We've got like the darkest part of the forest. It's kind of old now, right?
Has it? And why has it kind of like
or the cold
settled down a bit?
Sorry, that's what I'm thinking of. Sorry, I'm like talking over you.
No, I don't know what's going on with my stupid computer is lagging. But I was gonna say in YA, it feels like paranormal fantasy has like simmered down a little bit. Like people aren't publishing it at the rate they used to.
But there's got to be like real world fantasy, There's got to be something.
I mean, Cassandra Clare's still publishing books.
True.
Older, his books would kind of
Dorada Cordova's books.
I'm going to Epic Read's website, see what they have.
There's definitely still some like real world fantasy stuff.
You've got Vicious and Vengeful that are kind of like, is that paranormal because it's superheroes, or do superheroes fall under a totally different thing?
I tend to put superheroes under sci-fi.
And like that series, like there's definitely a lot of science too.
There's a lot of science in that book,
Kelly, you mentioned The Savage Song. That was you, right? That mentioned that?
It was me.
It was Emma. I'm sorry. I take it all back.
And like we still have like fairies, which are like a whole nother thing. Like with Cruel Prince, like it's technically in the real world, but it's like across the border into fairyland, but they like go to the real world a lot. So
Renee
Adia has her vampire book coming out.
Yes.
So
The Hazelwood, that was like a fairy tale retelling, but it definitely felt very paranormal urban fantasy.
Yeah, I feel like there's like still like a bit of fairies stuff going on. Like that hasn't disappeared nearly as much as like vampires and werewolves did in YA.
Is there witch stuff?
Yeah. What's that one Aaron just read?
Witches of Ash and Ruin.
Yeah, Witches of Ash and Ruin.
2020 by E. Latimer.
What's the one I'm thinking of with like the moon and the stars and the birds?
I can picture the cover.
Yeah.
What is it called?
Aaron would know this immediately.
Yeah. What is that book called?
Can I just Goodreads search witch?
I know, right? Wicked Deep. Yeah, the Wicked
Deep. Yes. That's witches. I want to say Claudia Gray pretty consistently pops out paranormal books.
Really?
Yeah.
I
guess I haven't read any of her paranormal books.
Leah said she tends to use contemporary fantasy for YA rather than urban fantasy, which is easier to think about. Because like urban fantasy for me is like a very distinct kind of adult fantasy, but there is some of it in YA. But apparently I can't think of any of it now.
Yeah, I kind of agree with Leah. Like I feel, there is like some things in YA that I would like call urban fantasy, but in general I tend to just say contemporary fantasy because more things fit into that don't really, they don't feel like urban fantasies.
Yeah, even some of them do. It's just easier to define them that way. Like Daughter of Smoke and Bone, like, and also no, but
or like something like The Raven Boys, which like is contemporary and fantasy, but it's not paranormal or urban fantasy. So I can kind of encompass
like what things. Even is this? Just throw it into a contemporary fantasy pile. Now I'm just like scrolling through my Goodreads.
I'm scrolling through a Goodreads list of like YA urban fantasy books, and so many of them are just the ones we've already talked about.
Yeah, one of the things I'm really interested in is just how it does straddle a lot of genres. Horror is one that it tends to like hold hands with. I feel like because a lot of horror stories have paranormal elements, but then once you get into the YA age category, it kind of like mixes even more. Like, is this so scary that it's horror, or is it urban fantasy, like The Call by Pater O'Galeen? Like, that's scary. Is it scary enough to be a straight up horror, or is it still an urban fantasy?
I consider The Call horror.
Yeah, definitely.
And there is that kind of urban fantasy.
Oh, no.
That line of like, yes, the one that you find attractive is a good vampire or whatever, but are most vampires still scary? Like,
Also, I feel like when looking at like urban fantasy versus paranormal, I feel like, and like in urban fantasy, you do get characters that like don't know about the magical world beforehand, but like you will find characters who are already a part of the magical world more often in urban fantasy than paranormal, if that makes sense. Especially in adult. Like there'll be like adult urban fantasy where this person's like, I was raised in like this like magical family or whatever, but like you never get that in paranormal romance. Like it's always like someone who's an outsider who learns about the world. Always in paranormal, where you get both in urban fantasy.
Yeah, thinking about it, I think most of the urban fantasy I love, they were raised in that magical world.
Magic in My Bed by Kelly Sheridan is like that. Already out.
I was going to say something, but I forgot. This list brings up Angel Fall.
Oh, yeah. See, that's another one that's like, it's pretty horrific. Is it horrific enough that you would sometimes call it a horror, or is it? But that one, I feel like more than The Call sits on the paranormal side because there's a lot more romance.
I'm still stuck at Eva's point about the like being raised in it thing, because a lot of urban fantasy heroines are a little more kick-ass. That like, so they've been raised in it, so they're stronger fighters, and that's a bigger part of their character.
Yeah, and they're not like having to like stumble around getting used to the world, which like is a fair thing to have to do when you learn that there are vampires, you know, like so when they already know about the world, that they can just jump into the action and not have to be like WTF is going on.
Yeah.
This list also includes Percy Jackson. Gods are a whole other thing, but it's definitely one that comes up a lot.
Yeah. See, it's definitely something I put in contemporary fantasy, but I don't know that I put it in urban fantasy. I don't know. Percy Jackson feels like it just fits in a category all on its own. Rick Riordan's written enough books that it can be its own genre.
Yeah. Mythical retelling. I mean, he has a publishing house now that publishes that genre.
But they do kind of like go out into the real world and see how. I've only read 2 or 3 of them. Like I remember things like I think it was Medusa in like a greenhouse or something. Like it was interesting of like putting them into modern settings, which is kind of what urban fantasy does.
One of the things you mentioned, Kelly, that I thought was really interesting, that I feel like is definitely a trope of the paranormal genre, is this like a leading lady who is, in general, whether it's backed up with good reason or not, like she can hold her own in this world, even though she might have to stumble around a little bit. Literally in the case of Twilight. And we're going to keep referencing Twilight, I'm sure, because that was like the first one to really explode. But I was looking up this history of paranormal and like its origins and stuff. And it was saying that it wasn't until it was like between 1987 and 1992 was when vampires and werewolves were added into the genre and heroines started really taking the front lines of paranormal stories. So fun fact for you guys. It happened in our lifetime.
Interesting. I feel like fallen angels and demons fall into that category too, right? Of paranormal. Yeah.
Yeah. They definitely tend to land more on the romance side, I think.
Yeah. Seems that way.
There was the what was that Cynthia Hand series about the angels? That one was more urban fantasy, because the girl, her mom, was like half angel or something, which made her a quarter angel. I really enjoyed that one. Hang on.
Unearthly?
Yes, Unearthly. That one was an angel, so it was solidly urban fantasy.
Yeah.
This chat is making me realize how little of paranormal and urban fantasy I've read.
I'm a big fan. Like, if I'm in the mood, I can tear through a paranormal book.
Megan was like, Claudia Gray, and I was like, the only Claudia Gray books I even know of are science fiction.
Yeah, if I'm in a reading slump, a paranormal will always get me out of it, because it's got like a fairly likable heroine who, you know, is gonna get the happily ever after, and then it's werewolves or vampires. They're familiar, but I like seeing the fresh takes on them. They're usually pretty quick reads. It's not like a really dense fantasy novel where it's gonna take me months to read it. So I love them. They always cure my book slumps.
Yeah, I find paranormal romances also tend to do a really good job of creating heroines that are like a little bit of like a self-insert type thing. That's like something they do really, really well. The other genres maybe don't always do quite as much, but they tend to be kind of like characters that, especially as a female reader, you can kind of like feel like you're the character, which is like a really talented thing to be able to do as a writer, honestly.
For sure.
It's like not make them so bland that you're like, is this even a human being? But like, but just like not too specific so that the character can or the reader can feel like they're a part of the story.
Yeah, that's what a lot of people look for as a reader too. Like I know sometimes I am for sure. Like I want to feel like I'm in the adventure, doing all the things.
And I think that's part of why people love Twilight so much, is because like you felt like you could be Bella. Like she was the girl that like she wasn't super gorgeous, but like all these boys liked her, and you're like, it could be me. Like, you know, if I just moved to a new town. Yeah, and, like she's clumsy, and you know she likes to read.
All over that.
Yeah, for real.
Yeah. My next question was basically going to be, what is it that readers love about this genre? But you guys went ahead and just answered that ahead of time. But digging a little deeper into it, if we're looking at it from like a writing perspective, what do you need to hit in order to like be that dream paranormal urban fantasy, whatever? Like, what are the must-dos? Obviously, there's no actual must-dos, but for the sake of the question.
I think they definitely, I mean, I can't really answer like specific must-dos because it isn't something that I read a ton of, but like it's definitely two genres where I think there are a lot of reader expectations for how the story is going to go. A lot like romance in general. And so like if you're going to write urban fantasy or paranormal romance, especially for like in the adult category, you really need to be familiar with like the conventions of the genre and what already exists and working within those things, because like readers are going to expect certain things from the story. Like in a paranormal romance, there better be a happy ending.
Yeah, it needs to be a happily ever after or a happy for now.
And it definitely tends towards very familiar supernatural creatures. Like you could, in theory, make up your own thing and follow the lines of either genre, but you don't see it. Like it's vampires and werewolves and fairies and
and there's certain traits of those things that come up every time where like you can like put like a little bit of your own spin on those creatures, but there are certain things I think people expect, like fairies can't lie and
vampires need to drink blood.
Yeah.
And
like werewolves imprinting, that comes up a lot, you know?
Yeah.
So.
It's so funny because when you said vampires, I was like, Sookie Stackhouse. I read all of those books, like back to back, the whole series. So. Those are pretty good. Or like Candy, they're only like this big, and like you said, Megan, I just like burned through them all.
Yeah,
like, read them so fast.
I do think with paranormal romance, one of the staples of the genre is like an element of danger from the supernatural community at large. Like the danger can't just be that, you know, it's a vampire and he wants to eat the girl. Like there also needs to be some societal problems. Like obviously him wanting to eat her should also be a problem, but there needs to be more to it than that to make it feel even bigger. Like their love is somehow going to save inequality or something.
All right. I'm actually doing terrible at like reading the comments in order, but at the bottom, Leah also said, I like seeing how writers use common human experiences and twisting them to fit magical/supernatural creatures, and that Buffy does that exceptionally well. But like it is supposed to like kind of mirror human things in these supernatural elements and amplify them and whatnot. But
like all
like
fiction.
Yeah. But yeah, there's tons of like TV shows as well that kind of.
Yeah, I noticed like this like history of paranormal romance that Megan sent us before the chat. Like Buffy is mentioned in there because it's like a big turning point in paranormal. Yeah. And urban fantasy kind of has elements of both.
For sure.
Well, I feel like a lot of the series got made into TV shows too, like The Vampire Diaries and then Vampire Academy and the Sookie Stackhouse ones too. And so they all got a lot of TV shows.
Vampire Diaries, yeah.
I tried to watch, I think it was The Vampire Diaries I tried to watch, and I just couldn't get
I watched tons of it. I never read the books.
I read like or watched like 3 seasons, I think, of Vampire Diaries. It was like super into it, and then like I just wasn't anymore. Like it was like 3 seasons, and I was like, no, I'm done. But I never read them.
I just couldn't get past the scene where they're all like going to high school, but they're all like clearly 25-year-old supermodels, and I'm like, I can't. I'm out.
That's Riverdale too.
I couldn't.
And like it's like in the first episode of Riverdale when they say that Archie is like 15. He's like a sophomore in high school. And I was like,
Yeah.
Okay.
Like, ripped and like really tall and like really square jaw. And I was like, no, that's
I'm
not
like looking at
female.
pictures of my male friends in high school.
And 15.
Look back at the screen.
Yeah.
Like they didn't even have the respect to say he
ladies.
was like 17. I had to
Yeah.
say 15.
I can't handle it. Like I can like even speaking of paranormal, one of the shows I really am obsessed with is Teen Wolf. Like I love that show, and I'm well aware they're all like 25, but they did at least choose actresses and actors that almost look 17 or 18, you know?
So he's like, at least choose
Whereas-
people who have baby faces. Come on.
Yeah, exactly. Like
I mean,
Styles
Styles
could
is a little
easily
bit better in the
be-
show because his face is still a little bit softer, but
Yeah.
KJ Appa, no.
Yeah.
That
no,
is like kind of a staple of the genre is like people who are unrealistically hot for
Yeah.
the age that they are.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. But Vampire Diaries was too much. I had no. I'm like I can't suspend my disbelief, and the vampires haven't even showed up on screen yet.
I feel like there's also like really a staple, especially like back when YA paranormal was a big deal with like the male supernatural creature, like even whether or not they were like immortal and old, like having a ton of independence. Because like the brothers in Vampire Diaries like live on their own in this like mansion and like
Yeah.
you know, so it like basically feels like adult, but the protagonist gets to be a teenager, you know.
Yeah.
So they get to have that like independence and freedom. They can go over to their boyfriend's house and there's no parents around, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's usually them falling in love with some like 15,000-year-old immortal,
Yeah.
which is like, that's kind of a staple of the genre,
Yeah.
which is kind of creepy.
It's creepy, but also totally like the fact that appeals to teenage girls. It's like, yeah, that like appealed to all of us as teenagers. Like when Twilight came out, like, ooh, I need a 300-year-old boyfriend.
300-year-old boyfriend is actually mature enough to hang out with me.
Meanwhile, like 27-year-old me would not want to hang out with 15-year-old me. Like,
No.
Let alone 350-year-old.
I was going to say, I was annoying at 19, never mind 17. I can't imagine a 300-year-old being like, yeah, no.
Yeah, I want to make out with this person.
Phone me after 200 years.
That was one of the things we talked about in the pre-chat, though, is that one of the big tropes of the genre is a much older, powerful being falling in love with someone much younger.
Ordinary, yeah. An ordinary girl that I can
An ordinary young person.
Yes, yes.
Because even like Sookie Stackhouse, which is adult, she's still younger.
Mm-hmm. Well, she's it's so funny because that series was a struggle to suspend my disbelief, but not again because of the supernatural creatures, but because she's literally dating a new guy about every 10 pages, it felt like, because every single guy that like crossed paths with her fell in love with her, including like the plumber that shows up to her door and like yeah, like wow.
But she's so plain. So average.
Yeah, and she's not even supernatural. Like if she was a vampire, I'd be like, okay. But yeah, it was getting out of control towards the end.
But yeah, I mean, for better or for worse, that's definitely one of the tropes of the genre is like a girl who doesn't see her extraordinary qualities because they aren't there. And everyone being like, wow, look at this magnificent average beast. I must have her.
So like you can argue that there's more of an element of like wish fulfillment than just like standard fantasy.
Right.
It's where it gets married with romance, I feel like.
Yeah.
But even like sometimes just being the like girl who saves the day rather than the girl who gets the guy. Like it's just that.
For sure.
Yeah.
Which is probably why it's such a fast read. It's like crack, right? You can't stop reading.
And like paranormal and urban fantasy are both genres that are like very much like dominated and steered by women. Like it's female wish fulfillment and like the things we want, and like, you know, like a woman who like every guy is into her and she gets to have control over her relationships and who she chooses to be with. Like there's a lot of like female agency things going on too with that, with like why that appeals so much.
Like I get to choose which of these 750 men are.
Yeah, it's true. And then there's that, and then it very often gets like, I know have very mixed feelings about this, but feels like it very often is the love interest is like we said earlier. I'm trying to resist my feelings to like insert whatever, eat you, stab you, turn you into a werewolf, whatever. Like so much of the time that comes into play, like, oh, I'm dangerous, stay far away from me.
Yeah.
But I'm also soft-hearted.
Please save me.
I can play sonatas and quote poetry.
Yes, piano playing is a trope I am always for.
Yes.
It's like musical abilities and ability to quote poetry are always great.
Yes.
Like, oh wow, what a shock. He can play the piano. Who saw this coming?
He's had hundreds of years of free time to like pick up.
Right. He's perfected the pieces that he plays. Yeah. Makes sense.
I think it was a Twitter thread I came across recently of like wondering why more of those kind of characters aren't in like college instead of high school. Like, go get degrees for years and years instead of staying in high school for like if you could. Like if you're in a university setting and like you're the dark and twisty vampire guy, you're gonna find friends no problem. No one's gonna like look twice at you. You can get a degree in everything, but all of these people stay in high school forever.
Maybe they just really like home economics. You don't know.
I think in Twilight they kind of like address that like because of like the age they're like frozen in time at. You know, like they kind of have like a range of ages they can pretend to be. And so they basically just they'll start like with high school and go all the way through college, like just over and over again, you know? They can't just stay in college for forever. Yeah.
And they can't just go get a job.
Yeah, because eventually people realize they're not getting older. Yeah. And because they look like they're like 18 maybe. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'd love
I would love to see more of those in like but like see more of them in like a new adult age setting would be fun.
Yeah.
And I feel like you could have a lot to play with there. Like, what kind of existential crises do these monsters have? Like, am I just going to be going to college forever? Compared with like a regular college student who's like, I'm going to be paying off these college loans forever.
And you're like, do they have cycles they go through where they're like, I'm going to get an apprenticeship and master the art of this job. And then, let's go back to high school for 200 years. Like they must do different things other than go to college for 500 years. Like
I'm really interested and like excited for Leigh Bardugo's like college age series she's doing. It's like about the girl who like goes to Yale, I think, and like gets involved in like this like secret society.
Yeah.
I'm interested to see like if that falls more on like a paranormal romance side or an urban fantasy side. It'll be cool to see because that'll be like a college age thing.
Erin, did you watch The Order? I think you tweeted about it.
Yeah, I'm on like season 2 or something. Yeah.
No, like really that brand new. There's 2 seasons of that.
Oh, I don't know.
There's only 1 season. It's like a new Netflix show. Yeah.
Okay. Yes. Yeah. I'm near the end of it, but yeah. I liked it.
Because that was like magic in a university setting or something, right?
Yeah, it's like a secret society in a university.
It is, but it has definite paranormal elements too, which surprised me. I wasn't expecting the paranormal elements. And I'm still like what's that?
I was gonna say when I like read the description, I was like, oh, this sounds similar to Leigh Bardugo's new series that's coming out.
Well, it reminds me strongly of The Magicians, actually, and then they've very much thrown in paranormal elements too, and that I found almost off-putting initially, but I don't know. I'm gonna keep watching and see. It's just not where I expected it to go.
They've targeted me as like a paranormal viewer, so all of the images that they've shown me are like a spooky girl standing next to a wolf and stuff. So, like, looks very paranormal.
Oh,
like,
they didn't do that for me.
Has looked paranormal. It's like
I kind of assumed paranormal as well.
I didn't see anything to do with wolves initially, and it doesn't give that away until 3 or 4 episodes in.
See, I don't think I saw wolves. I think I just assumed wolves based on like the ads I saw of like, this is like magic-y paranormal stuff. There's gonna be
okay, interesting. Yeah. And they didn't hint at it initially. I guess I didn't see any ads, so.
Yeah, they've been trying to get me to watch it, but I haven't done it yet. And so they keep just making bigger and bigger pictures of the girl next to the wall.
You
want to watch this.
I looked up new adult paranormal romance, and like Goodreads has a super long list of them. So
I bet.
there's definitely a lot of like Jennifer L. Armentrout and like Presley Cole and Gina Showalter, like a lot of them have written multiple series. It looks like so.
I do feel like we
were men on these covers.
Yeah,
as expected.
I feel like for a long time, the last several years is what I mean by long time, in the traditional publishing world, there hasn't been as much. It's been much harder to publish like a paranormal romance or an urban fantasy. But I do think that we're starting to see a renaissance in that with like some fresh takes on it. Because right now the past self-publishing is different. There's a lot more variety there. There's a lot more diversity out there. But in traditional publishing, thus far, paranormal has been generally very white, very straight, very cisgendered. And I am hopeful that the future of it will not be so white, straight, and cisgender.
It's like really like such a shame and so like counterintuitive when you think about it that like vampire books have been so heterosexual. And it's like, come on.
Oh yeah.
Vampires are like so like homoerotic. Like, come on.
That's very true.
Like Interview with a Vampire, really.
It's so funny because when you were talking about like, you know, the scene where Edward's like, let me play you a sonnet or whatever, I'm like, cool. Now give me that with a bisexual girl vampire that's like for the theme. I'm like, if you not gender swap, but if you just put a girl in Twilight and I will watch the crap out of that
instead.
Yes.
I loved Alice.
Swap it. Yes, Alice. That would be the cutest shit ever. I'm sorry. Let's do this.
I feel like Alice would be like, so you're really sure you want to be a vampire?
Yeah.
Okay, let's do this.
Okay, let's go.
Put in a much shorter book with Alice.
Like, I respect your choices and your agencies.
Yeah, it would be a way healthier relationship, aside from the vampire aspect of it. And then there could be less mooning and problems and whining, and it could just be about fighting the bad vampires from Italy or whatever they were. Right?
Never imprint on a baby.
Right. It would be a way better series. So yeah, I'm down for sapphic vampire paranormal. Bring it, all of it.
And there is a vampire anthology coming out that V.E. Schwab is authoring on. That I'm pretty sure is going to be very much more diverse than.
Good. There was a lot of agents asking for vampires a while ago, so I
like 6 months ago. So
yeah, exactly.
18 more months, baby. It's coming.
Yeah.
And like with how much more diverse young adult publishing is like becoming, like some of those books have to be more diverse than what we used to get in the early 2000s.
One would hope.
Yeah, hopefully.
And it's like even if it follows all the same tropes, it's going to be something different because it's a story being told from a different lens.
Exactly. Yeah. See, that makes me excited to pick urban fantasy and paranormal up again, because I think I'm just so used to seeing the same thing over and over and over that getting like a POC vampire or, like I said, sapphic vampires, I'm like, yeah, that is something I haven't seen. Please. I'd probably pick up all these books, start reading paranormal again.
Yeah. And I know there are some out there. It's just so much more difficult to find right now. So if you have any that you love, or if you wrote them, drop them in the discussion section or in the comments if you're watching this later. I know sometimes it can be frustrating hearing people be like, these things don't exist, and you're like, but I wrote it.
Yeah.
Definitely drop it if you did.
Yeah, recommendations are great, because maybe I'll start getting back into paranormal and then start with those ones.
I believe, because there's tons of, like Megan said, the diversity all over the self-published ones. And looking at the top 100 in paranormal and urban fantasy, both in YA and adult, it's almost exclusively self-published stuff. But the Discovery of Witches is all over everything right now because it had the TV show. Yeah. Twilight is still in the top 100 for teen, which is surprising. Wow. Harry Potter's #1. But the Codex Blair series by Izzy Shouse, I think she is pansexual.
Okay. Ooh, nice.
So I remember that one. But
The vampire anthology Megan mentioned that Victoria Schwab is a part of is called Vampires Never Get Old.
Nice.
It doesn't come out until September 2020, so it's going to be a while.
Yeah.
So like 18 months.
Yeah. And Victoria Schwab's story specifically is a super gay vampire story about two girls who each have a crush and a secret. So
Yes! I'm so excited now. Oh my gosh. I'm pumped. That's amazing.
And like Heidi Heilig and Marco Shiro are parts of it. Zoraida Cordova. So yeah. Samira Ahmed.
Oh, good.
Definitely should be some.
It's not going to be all white.
Yeah. Rebecca Rowanhorse, who's a native author. So that's cool.
Awesome. See, yeah, I'd love to get some of the native mythology too, because I know they have some really cool. I mean, I don't know how much they would write of it, but
yeah,
it'd be very cool.
And after Stephanie like super appropriated and like slaughtered native traditions in Twilight, it'd be great to see a native person tell a paranormal story.
Yeah. Yes.
I don't know if the author has any legit background there, but my favorite urban fantasy series that I mentioned, Mercy Thompson, there's a lot of native stuff in there. Like the main characters, this is kind of a spoiler, but her dad ends up being coyote or some form of, so like, and she is, I forget what the like name for her, she's a coyote shifter, but they have some actual name for that. So it's big in there.
Read that one again. This is the type of thing that I wouldn't be surprised if was published like back then kind of thing by white authors, so I would be careful of that. Not saying that she is, but I don't know, they weren't quite as own voices as they are now. So
yeah, I think there definitely are some like native characters in some like urban fantasies and paranormals because of like shifter mythology. But yeah, it's like how well has it been handled?
Exactly.
As a non-native person, I don't know.
Yeah, exactly.
But I'll be willing to bet that in a lot of cases it wasn't handled well.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, I know even some of the Neil Gaiman books I've read, like I don't know how he handled it, but there's no way I would take that mythology and use it. There's just no way as a writer. No. What about Neil Gaiman? Would he be paranormal? I don't know.
Where does his stuff go?
I don't know.
Contemporary fantasy.
American Gods is American Gods, obviously, but he does have one. He does have one that's like an underground London. So I'm like, would that be like urban fantasy? I guess because it's set in like an alternate magical city, essentially. So
yeah.
Interesting. Now I'm double guessing everything. Like, is it paranormal, urban fantasy?
Stardust has a little bit of like a portal fantasy vibe because they like cross into a different world. Yeah,
that seems much more not
all
high
very
fantasy,
different,
but more fantasy. Yeah. I think he just writes whatever kind of pops into his brain.
It's the Neil Gaiman genre.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It goes on the shelf next to the Rick Riordan genre. And
yes.
We had a question from N. Griswold. What are your favorite paranormal beings / creatures? And Griswold likes werewolves.
Yo.
I like werewolves.
I like fairies.
Fairies are good too.
I can be a big fan of like a good Angels and Demons book, especially if it like grapples with the like religious ethics of it all and stuff. Or if it's like an absent god, I will devour that book in like 35 minutes. Like, I'm all over it.
I prefer like non-Christian god stuff, like Greek gods, and like Gwenda Bond did a series a while ago, I think, or just one book of like all of these different ancient gods kind of waking up in the real world or something. It was really cool.
So I was raised in like a really high demand Christian religion, and so I love seeing that just get wrecked.
Yes.
With a very heavy romance.
I'm here for that. So would you call gods like Greek gods and stuff that would be paranormal, or because like angels and demons are, so
Depends on tone.
I feel like when it's like angels and demons, it's very easy to put like a limited scope on it that feels very like werewolves and vampires, because they aren't like, they have these god-like powers, but they aren't gods. They aren't omnipotent. They can't do everything. And once you like step into Greek gods, it gets much more omnipotent, which feels much more fantasy than
I'm never gonna remember the title. There's what I read.
Like, I was gonna say, I kind of consider books that deal with like mythologies as like kind of a genre of their own. Like, I would really put them with
complicated.
Yeah.
Because like even the book I'm revising now, Witches of Ash and Ruin, has Irish gods in it, but I don't think I would ever title it paranormal at all. So, or even, what
would you title it?
Well, my agent sold it as contemporary fantasy.
Contemporary fantasy.
No.
And that is like the weird thing about traditional publishing and changing times, is that like 10 years ago, you guys probably would have tried this as a paranormal, but now you sell it as a contemporary fantasy.
Well, it's full of witches too, right? So would witches go under paranormal? Like, I would pair them originally with
they kind of go under whatever is selling.
Yeah.
Like Beautiful Creatures feels very paranormal.
Yes.
Yeah.
And witches.
And like there's Witches and Vampire Diaries.
Okay.
But witches are definitely in every
everything.
Like, big urban fantasy.
Right. It's the same with wizards, I guess, because like the Dresden Files, he's technically a wizard, but like, I don't know.
Yeah, Wizard isn't a big one you see, but the Dresden Files was kind of like one of those genre-defining urban fantasy things. I haven't read it because I definitely prefer the female side of urban fantasy, but
yeah, I would agree with you on that one. There's a lot of like kind of veiled, not misogyny, but like slight sexism in it, not like in a nasty intentional way, but like you know what I mean.
I see a lot of them like the dude ones, a lot of them are PIs of like solving these really gruesome supernatural crimes. It's just not much. And then they hook up with lots of sexy supernatural beings, and you're like, okay. So it's dude wish fulfillment. We're not the target audience.
The opposite side of the coin, essentially. Yeah. So makes sense. That's fair.
We had another question from Xander asking any paranormal subgenres that you guys wish were more common or accepted.
Ooh, good question.
I want magical schools back.
We already have. Magical schools would be cool.
Yes. Can we have magical schools back? Because I love Harry Potter, but it's kind of ruined magical schools for anybody else.
No one else is allowed to publish it.
Apparently. I'm real salty about this.
To do it, but
I know. And I get real offended because I've been shot down by editors before. And I'm like, this magic school. And they're like, no. I'm like, Harry Potter's been like 15 years. It's been so long. Curse you, J.K. Rowling. I have so many things to be ticked off at you for today.
And especially when it's like not I feel like it's like feels really unfair when you're trying to do it in YA, because you're like, it's not a middle grade. Like I kind of understand it a little bit more when it's middle grade, because you like associate Harry Potter more with that, especially like the early books. But when you like want to do a YA book that's very different from Harry Potter and you still can't, it's like, but why?
Yeah, that's exactly right. It's like a high school for like usually for witches, and people are still like, no, it's too similar. It's literally just a school. That's the only similarity.
And that's where like Vampire Academy was that. It's a Vampire Academy. But I love that.
Well, that was published quite a while ago, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a very natural way to give young characters more freedom than they would have if they all lived at home.
Right.
And it keeps them all
fun going to class for magic
each other too.
Yes, I just want I just want a magic study group. That's all.
Yes.
Like Vampire Academy was a while ago, but it was still like a good chunk after the first Harry Potter. Like it wasn't.
There definitely was some other magical school stuff that came out like in the early Harry Potter days, like kind of riding those coattails, like the Charlie Bone books, which were such a Harry Potter ripoff. It was literally like an evil wizard, and there was like
oh wow,
the evil wizard wanted to kill Charlie Bone because he was supposed to defeat him. Yeah.
Rachel Hawkins had that like Hex Hall one.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, there were a few. Just it got burned out too, so now no one gets to do it.
No.
I would love to see even just some of the classic tropes. We probably won't do like a whole chat on horror, but I'm hoping that like Haunting of Hill House and The Haunting of Bly Manor are gonna bring back spooky houses.
Yes.
I would love to read more of those.
I am so there for that. That would be awesome.
I'm hoping that there's going to be a wave of books trying to write The Mummy better. Now, not better than the Brendan Fraser, because I mean, come on, but better than the Tom Cruise one, that people will have just rage written these books.
We had like not a resurgence, but we had like a little thing when Anna Dressed in Blood came out. Like I kind of thought that was going to start like a spooky horror / paranormal thing.
I was hoping that
with ghost hunters and stuff, but that really didn't seem to go anywhere after. It's a good series, but I didn't feel like I wanted more. It ended too soon, and then like Anna was on their side for book 2 or whatever, and I was
I didn't read book 2 because Anna was on their side.
I'm like, I want Anna to be real bad, and I want the book
blood, guys.
Like I don't want the friendly Casper ghost. I want to screw shit up, you know.
I feel like that's generally what I would like to see more in paranormal is like these monsters are scary, and you can fall in love with one, but they are scary.
Yeah.
I feel like YA horror is one of those genres that like never like becomes like the it genre, but like there's just like little sprinklings of it every now and then. You know, it's like never like fully dead, but it's never like the big thing.
Well, I think like in Anna Dressed in Blood, he falls for Anna, and I was really not having that. That's why I stopped reading. Yeah, it was not good. That's why I stopped reading it. The first one was brilliant, and then I don't know. It wasn't what I was hoping for.
We had a comment from Anne Griswold that I would love to talk about. Listening to this chat has made me realize the book I'm about to start plotting is paranormal, not urban fantasy. I'm always so worried I'll muck up with genre selection and people will look at me crazy. And I feel like there's so many different lines that like, if you say it's urban fantasy when really it might be a little more paranormal, like that's not going to matter.
No.
Like people will find it because there's so much overlap here.
I like what they were saying with Aaron's books of like, it's kind of what makes sense at the time. Like there's a lot of things you can call it that are kind of the same thing. Like there's no one definition even. Like we've kind of settled into something. That's because we talked about it a lot.
And I feel like with this whole revival period, we're going to see a lot of twists on the old tropes. And while if it's a romance, it's always going to have a happily ever after, I feel like we're going to start seeing a whole new set of tropes coming into play and adding a fresh twist. And so really like, it's important to know the tropes of the genre that you're writing. But if you have a fresh look on it, like now is the time to try it because it's about to start coming back and people are going to be looking for new twists on it.
It's true.
That seems like a pretty good point to end on. Like we haven't quite gotten the whole hour, but I feel like we've been talking pretty intensely this whole time. We've covered a lot of ground.
Which I'm really surprised by because I'm, for me personally, me and Emma are like, what have I read that is paranormal? Much.
Yeah. And it's like, you don't have to stress about your paranormal, maybe urban fantasy, maybe contemporary fantasy book fitting into like, oh, this is perfectly a paranormal story. Like it can be what you want it to be. And if I think Anne Griswold mentioned later, like breaking into a cold sweat because someone asked what it was about. And like, You could just be like, it's weird and there's vampires or something. Weird and there's vampires and I think you would love it or something.
Yeah. Yeah, I would never worry too much about like whether you're self-publishing or trying to traditionally publish. I wouldn't worry too much about, you know, where you're categorizing it. The only thing I would say if you're trying to query it is just don't tack on all of the genres you think it might be, because that's not great.
See, it's actually the flip advice for self-publishing. Like in terms of paranormal and urban fantasy, because you absolutely, if you're self-publishing, you need to know where to categorize it. You are responsible for putting in categories. But urban fantasy and paranormal are the same category on Amazon. And really, you can put it in any category it might be in. Like that's fine. So
yeah, and then in traditional publishing, like your agent and your editor will help you figure it out. You know,
because most agents, team of professionals.
Because I'm willing to bet that most agents who are looking to represent like paranormal would also be okay with an urban fantasy and vice versa. You know, so they'll help you figure out what'll be most marketable for your story.
Yeah, a lot of agents who rep those things, instead of just saying, I like paranormal, they'll tell you specifically the type. Like, I'm looking for vampires. And whether it's vampires in an urban fantasy or a paranormal, like, they just want the blood-sucking creatures.
Yeah, exactly.
Was there anything else anyone wanted to touch on before we wrap?
I don't think so.
Paranormal.
Go forth and write. Yeah.
You can do the
fun
thing.
writing your paranormal.
All right, everyone. Thank you so much for watching. This was a lot of fun. Absolutely let us know in the discussion what other genres you want us to dive into next. We'll be doing this again sometime fairly soon, I'm sure. It was a lot of fun. Super interesting. And we will be back next week with a write-in. Yes. And then 2 weeks after that with Vicious and Vengeful. So we've got lots of good stuff coming up. We can't wait to see you all there. And with our daily videos for the rest of the week and all of that. So thank you again. We will see you all next time. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.